Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night maybe. Here, Marcelo. I'm a student in a master's degree on innovation and sustainability. And today I have the pleasure to be interviewing Carrie Chen, co-founder of the company Avant Meat. Carrie, would like to introduce yourself for our audience for a bit, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcelo, for having us and having me being part of your program. Super interesting. And I'm Carrie Chen, co-founder and CEO of Avant Meat. We are the very first cultivated meat technology company of China. And we are currently based in Hong Kong Science Park to do our research. For the audience who might not heard about cultivated meat, is basically using the cell technology that we can actually produce meat or animal proteins without that needing to raise or catch or slaughtering animal for the product. We have been doing that since early 2019, have done some prototype products, and we actually will be having some product in the market in a couple of years, but our team of scientists is working very hard. But happy to share anything related to sustainability leadership with all of you, my story and the story about the company.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Already, thank you very much for your time. So I know that you would like to share with us a story on responsible leadership and focused on your professional life and also on the relation with, how you think on systems. So the competency would be systems thinking. And so this story will help us to have a new perspective on responsible leadership. Carrie, can you share with us more about this?
Sure. I think today I would like to share two major points, two major perspectives. One is about the ideology of having division of labors. The other is the leadership. So leadership is something that is a common goal, is a mission. It is basically one single driving force, which is so clear and obvious, pointing out the path to what we want to achieve. Is concurrent in everything. However, in our modern society, we are actually in a system whereby we are actually divided up into different roles and different skill set, etc. Let's say example, in my case, or maybe a little bit more the academic like planning of the syllabus now may be more diverse, but most of the people were actually trained in one particular area. For example, more technical role like engineering, more maybe designer, or maybe accounting, maybe lawyer, etc. And then it actually works for society as a whole because we do have people as expert of individual domains. And indeed, we would, as we develop in those areas like the legal system or like the technical advancement, etc., we do need people, education system, to really have people, develop very deeply and very focused on individual area. However, as a society operate as our own, or even for a corporation or company, or even for a startup, these ideology may not be, sometimes it could be a challenge that the leadership, the people in the leadership role will need to take care of. So today I'd like to share a little bit about it. So when we start the company, Avant Meat, a little background of myself. I am not a scientist. My background is in the business field. We are a biotech company. And so that means that there are quite a lot of science that I personally haven't studied when I was a student. For a startup or in any corporation, it is actually very important that the team have very complementary skill sets. So there will be people who will be doing the actual, like the technical thing. There are people thinking about the commercial, financial, marketing, and sales, etc. That is very important. So now how the leadership can do the job more efficiently. Of course, at the onset, the leader would set up the mission, the direction, and everything. But then how to implement or how to actually motivate people to work in the same direction, I think is one of the challenges. And I personally draw a lot of experiences from my previous life before my startup. My previous role also need to work with people from all walks of all different disciplines. And for example, we need to work with the scientist team, understanding what are the challenges for the R&D. As a company, of course, we need to talk to the investor and let them know what our progress and what we would be able to deliver, the result, etc. And then with our like financial aspect, how we manage our numbers, etc. So how to put everything together. I personally find that it is actually very important as a leader to be able to do two things. There are a lot of things, but I think two most important point is that it's a very multidisciplinary language. The person driving in the driving seat should, I would think that it will be definitely very beneficial to try to speak the language of these individual disciplines to a certain extent that one can communicate with the expert in that domain. The second is that I think is pulling everything together and also lining up with the balance that we can actually have a more holistic and comprehensive picture. It sounds a little bit abstract, but one example that we do, for example, in our case, I would at the beginning of the company setup, I actually spent quite a lot of time doing a lot of desktop research on different how cells are cultivated. Actually going through some scientific paper literature. There are definitely a lot of jargons and texts and words I wouldn't know. But thanks to the technology now, so many information are actually accessible from the internet. So actually we go after to the easiest starting point is going to, like for example, in vitro cell cultivation. I will go to Wikipedia and then there will be a lot of links that connect to different definition. And then I would spend, I think at the beginning, I spent like a couple of weeks going through to different terms. For example, how muscle cell turn into a muscles. And that's term like myogenesis and something like that. And I didn't know that. So I spent a lot of time looking into reading and trying to understand as much as I could, jotting notes just as like self-education process. Of course, if time afford, I think if you also have interest in that discipline, definitely worth taking some short courses, etc. But I think that is very important. So with that, I would be able to speak with my co-founder, who is a scientist, and so I can understand more about the challenges. So what is the difficulty in achieving certain scientific milestone or progress? Sometimes a lot of people who are in the commercial field, they would think that, oh, it is quite easy. Why we can't have a certain deliverable in 1 year time? If we do not understand the challenges on the science side, I think that will have some internal challenges in communication, managing expectations on the outside, etc. So I think that is very important. And let's say the leadership, the person is in a role managing something very super technical. It could be IT, it could be coding, it could be AI, it could be fintech. So you might not be coming from that domain, but I think it definitely well to do a lot of those self-education to begin with, and also takes genuine interest in those fields. I think they're definitely helpful to begin with. And then I think, and then the other that is the multidisciplinary language. The other is how to level up the different aspects. So in my role, I really need to manage the I think the managed expectations is actually a very good term, and it happened both externally and internally. For our investors, we need to manage the expectation, what we can do, what we have done, our progress, and internally I would need to let them know what is the company direction is doing, what we need to deliver, and then in order set a very clear goal and assign the people the ownership of different projects and milestones in order to drive towards the direction. Of course, in the middle, as we know, 1 or 2 projects we started, let's say, earlier this year, and hoping that we will finish that by the middle of the year. But then, as you know, R&D means trial and error, so it doesn't mean that we can actually get the hard completion of that task by that time. So ongoing communication and also understanding what is happening is very important. And then I really emphasize expectation management internally. Let's say if they see any of the development on the projects is facing a lot of challenges, definitely encourage them to go to you. And I think it needs to create a company culture or working culture that people are allowed to fail and be transparent and honest about the challenges they feel, instead of penalizing people the first moment you heard that we're not going to achieve a certain milestone by that specific time. Because as we know, there are a lot of moving parts in this. And then if we do not create an open and a lower, like kind of, I think the sense of allowing people to be transparent about the failure, but because failure is not the end, right? Failure, that means that this task, we learn a lot of things from it. It is not the solution, but then we can learn from it, and then we can do another task. We can design another experiment in order to go about what we want to achieve. Or maybe we might also need to fine tune about the company certain tactics eventually as well, because we see challenges in this, but how about we doing that, and then we need to change course a little bit. So that's what I think the communication is very important, and lining up, managing the, so if we see challenges in this area, while on the other, there are different questions and demand the other, the role of the leadership will be very important to think up of a overall comprehensive thing that will try to be like fitting all of the challenges, and while delivering more progress towards the direction that the company wants to achieve. Yeah, in our case, for example, one method of doing that research may prove to be challenging. We couldn't achieve the milestone by the middle of the year, and then we have a very frank discussion saying, well, no worry, just share what are the challenges. Let's sit down and talk through what are the other options out there, and then maybe we can change our direction slightly, and then we set another time milestone so that we can go on to see what is happening. So I think as a leader, it's very important to take genuine interest and actually allow the team member to have a sense of I don't know what is the term. People feel secure that if they are being honest about the not unsuccessful case, they would not be penalized. And you need to build that culture, not by just saying, but by acting, actually setting the examples. So these are the two key main points. I think that might be applicable in a lot of different settings, both in startup or even in corporate. I would reckon the audience, they might be in a key role in a big corporation, and then they might be championing some sustainability kind of initiative. And I think it will still apply there, talking to the expert and specialists in different business unit, etc., and try to manage the direction together, and being open-minded. I think that would be quite versatile and quite generic. This is what I would like to share. Questions are welcome.
Thank you very much for sharing this story with these two main points. Multiple disciplinary language, and also so how to pull everything together, like across disciplines. It was super interesting. I would have a question. So you were telling me that you need to reach the milestones and deliver results, because you are a startup, right? And I believe in a very competitive domain nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
And at the same time, you are trying to be sustainable in time and to really deliver results that are
right.
Filling society's needs. And so how do you balance these stakeholder needs for fast results, but also the long-term view?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I think the long-term will, people are generally quite looking forward to really a perfect solution for what we are facing environmentally, the challenges. And in the short term, there are actually investors, in particular the capital market. We understand that the capital market, why they invest in something, is that they want the return at a certain point. Some of them are more patient than the others. Some are some are willing to wait a couple of years more than the others, but generally people do concern about the return. And then we actually have seen investors who actually would prefer a more immediate return of revenue than later. And so, for example, there are actually some solutions. We are refraining from doing so, although those solutions would be quite accessible. For example, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but it's more related to the limitation of the market that we operate in. So I'm talking about GM. So genetical modification, it is still a little bit more controversial kind of technology. And in the science field, I've spoken to a lot of scientists, young to old to retired professor, dean of department, etc. And I think from the scientific domain, there has not been a very clear-cut kind of evidence that the GM is having a lot of risk for people's health, etc. Environmental, maybe. I do understand where it's coming from, but I think that they're actually still very controversial. So let's put that aside because we're not discussing about that here. Where we're operating in the China market, or maybe to a certain extent some market in Europe, either on the consumer level, but in the China it's actually the regulatory constraint. We cannot do any product that use genetical modification. Although we know that in the cell culture medium, it is actually very available now. Those technology is very mature. It actually can help to speed up some of the process, or maybe helping with the efficiency or productivity in the mid to long term. And so in our case, we refrain from using those tools because of the market that we are going to have our product. It is forbidden, so we cannot go to that line. I think then that is quite easy because we can tell our investor, if their investors say, hey, why don't you do that? But by then you can do the product quicker or at a lower cost. In this case, we have the regulation as a compliance concern. But on the other hand, I think there are also the other question people should also start thinking about. Even before people ask you, just think about how diesel engine or the cars was invented long time ago. It is making the public transport or people, they do not need to rely on carriages anymore. But then that create some other new environmental impact, like the exhaust film, like the CO2, the pollutants from the vehicles, right? So we need to be mindful as a leader. We need to be mindful that by solving some existing problems, we will not create some other set of problems. I think at this point of time, not many people talk about it, but for people who really care about it, I think they should start thinking about it. Just in our case, we actually very cautious about what are the other side impact. I'm not talking about health because we know that what it goes into the whole process is actually food grade. We can actually just eat those, but then it's more about the surrounding, like the discharge still from the whole setup from the factory that we will be building. That would definitely be some discharge. It could be sewage, it could be other thing that it always risk there. So we need to manage that before the society actually find out, hey, this new industry is creating another new problem, and then it's no good. So I think we need to learn from the past. And we need to take that on earlier, and we need to build that into our KPI and a company like area that we need to take care of. Yeah, so it's a long answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. But it answers my question. I see different tools to balance this need for short-term and long-term.
Right.
And, actually, usually we see regulations as something we need to comply with and a barrier. And actually, in managing these stakeholder relations, law and regulations can actually be a good tool right? To
Yeah,
seek for the long term. Like, oh, I can do this short term
right.
action that you want because I have this regulation and I need to comply with it. So
Yeah, so that's the mandatory and the voluntary. And generally, I think it's a good practice for the company not to only to comply with the minimum standard, but think about something a bit beyond that. We learned in the past that by being complying with the minimum, we can do so in the short term, but in the long run, it will build into our own internal system that those more upcoming requirement, we will not be able to achieve that. So always aim for a little bit longer, although aim for a little bit better standard, although not overkilling stuff, of course, but yeah, strike a balance between the two.
yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, then, for sharing. I would have two last questions, the last questions actually.
Mm.
Um, which is the main message that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, so the audience would be our future young people who are actually taking a very serious consideration into championing some sustainability action in different kind of professional settings, right? So yeah, I think that what I would like to share with the audience is that and nowadays I actually start seeing the trend that a lot of people, even for the investment, it's very easy to take sustainability, ESG, or the United Nations, those goals, as to some of the facade to make financial gain. But I think the person, if you are the person actually driving something, you will, I think each of us should actually honestly ask ourselves how genuine we're actually doing those. For example, I say some example, which is some company in the CSR, corporate social responsibility, in the old days, I mean, some companies still doing that, is that, well, okay, if I do business and every dollar I make, I will contribute some money to planting some trees in some parts of the world and that sort of thing, which is fine. And there are actually a lot of the stories saying that, well, I be just doing my business, separating the two. I doing the business, I exploiting the poor people, I exploiting, and even I close my eyes to like child labor or something like that. But then when I make a lot of money, I can do good things. I can donate the money and be a philanthropist. I think this is very old dated. It is very the last century or last decades kind of mentality. And so, which does not work as we know now. So people cannot make tons of money by destroying the environment and not upholding certain value, but just paying like lip service that I'm planting some trees, thinking that, well, I am a fossil fuel company, I just planting some trees, right? Or I just squeeze the little money from the most exploited like contract staff who are just barely making the money in order to survive, but you're not actually giving them the fair wage or whatever that they can do a decent living standard. But then on the other hand, I make so much money, I can donate to the children hospital or something like that. That is only making ourselves feeling good, right? And it is not really, it is creating trouble, it's creating problem. And then you are actually trying to say that you're helping with that problem by doing something else. So I don't think this is going to work. It worked in the past many decades, but we've seen that's not working. So I have to say that if you were ever in any role in particular, for example, I take like if you're in a procurement role, so think about what you were asked for the supplier to provide you with information. Do you go through the process whether they actually source the material sustainably? Do they rely on anything that does not align with the good standard? And I think sometimes even corporations, they may not have those matrix or requirements or in the system as yet. And I think each of us in our own role, actually we hold the power to initiate, actually tell the company, shall we build that into the, let's say in the previous, we do a tendering system. We ask different suppliers to tender for a certain project. Do we just go for the cheapest guy and do not ask them where do you get this material from and how you hire your labor? Do you provide them with the like protective equipment, etc., something like that? If we skip that, it will just go and then we'll see all those problems in the news. But if we are in the position to make the decision, why don't we just add, like at another table, hey, can you provide me with this data so that you can present to your company, your senior management, look, this is the cheapest supplier, but then they're actually, you know, sourcing this from this and that, and this is kind of not up to our standard. You can definitely do that, and everyone holds that power. You don't need to be the senior VP or the president, and everyone as a manager. You can actually insert those, and I think that is where you started to take leadership. It does not need to be the most senior guy in the company to do that, and everyone holds the power to doing that. So that's what I would like to leave to the audience.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank
Very
you, Marcelo.
shortly, a practice that you do and that helps you going towards responsible leadership you would like to share?
The practice. Yeah, I think that I think it is leadership in general or sustainability is that a lot of the time, if we operate in a corporate settings or professional settings, quite a lot of time, maybe in Asia more so, maybe less so in Europe or other places, is a lot of hierarchy. And I think that how I find will be very useful is actually take interest in the people that you work with, treat them as, even if they're a supplier, even they are the tier that is like you are the upper hand to them. Well, try to be like interact that with them as a friend and know them as a person. You will find out more. You can actually be more transparent, discuss more, and even negotiate more, or you can achieve more together than where it's coming from is mostly more from Asian kind of working culture. It's very hierarchical. People just treat their supplier or the contractor, just giving them demand. But I mean, outside of a meeting room or outside of the what you do day to day, I mean, it's definitely good to know them as a person and interact them in more respectful or personal way. I think it always helps to get things done, even in company, with your colleagues, with your subordinates, etc. In the future. Yeah, that's what I would say. Take interest in other people's job, domain expertise, etc. And so that actually build up how you can actually achieve more as a leader.
Great. Thank you very much, Carrie, for
Thank
this
you,
interview
Marcelo.
and for your time. See
Thank
you.
you. See you.
Bye.
Bye.